Hello, everybody. It is Monday, and sometimes on a Monday, one finds it hard to decide where to start the week because often, like me, you catch up on news and things over the weekend, and by Monday, your head is so full of information that it feels like bursting. I said I will come back on the Kohberger case, and it took a while because, for me, the Kohberger Idaho 4 case is one of the most puzzling cases I have ever taken any interest in. So late in the game, most of the true crime creators have spoken about the case and dissected every aspect of it, and I myself had spoken about most aspects of what is known about the case. And as I've mentioned, the time in which it took an inexperienced killer to kill 4 people with a knife, basically hand-to-hand combat, is one of the main things which makes me doubt this man's guilt. But I have spoken about it so many times that I want to move away from that particular aspect because that is obviously not the only questionable aspect of the case. My next question had always been whether law enforcement actually has Bryan Kohberger's vehicle tags on a traffic camera, doorbell camera, or any camera in order to convince us that it was indeed his car at the murder house. Because if they don't, then they have a problem, as there are more or less 22,000 Hyundai Elantras in Idaho. To date, absolutely no one could tell me why, what was the actual reason why law enforcement settled on Bryan's Elantra as the one driven by the perpetrator. I think I've spoken about this before. Even if it was Bryan Kohberger's Elantra and they could prove it, it still does not prove he did the crime. Because from what I understand, there is not a single piece of evidence that that vehicle was used by the killer. From what I understand, there was no DNA found in Bryan Kohberger's car to link him to the murders, not a speck of blood or a single hair. Okay, I mean, he was arrested and his vehicle impounded more than a month, about a month and a half after the murders. But as we know, luminol can show blood even after it had been washed off, and DNA can hide in the smallest crevice. I'm yet to hear of a case such as or similar to this one where there are multiple victims, where there was not any kind of DNA linking the victims to the killer. A normal human being can clean until he is blue in the face, but unless he has some forensic tools and the knowledge law enforcement has, there is no way he can hide evidence of such a vicious crime. So did Bryan Kohberger spray his own vehicle with luminol to make sure that he had removed every single speck of blood? What else did he do to ensure that there was no trace of evidence? Because of his field of study, it is possible that Bryan Kohberger could have, for all intents and purposes, examined his own vehicle forensically. But when and where would he have done so without drawing attention? How would he have been able to buy whatever he needed without drawing attention? How long was Bryan Kohberger under surveillance before he was arrested? A few days, according to law enforcement and news media. So did officers see him clean his vehicle to that degree? Early on, there were stories that he was seen by neighbors cleaning his vehicle with gloves. But does that mean anything? When I was younger, I got eczema on my hands triggered by certain soaps and detergents, or so they said. I obviously think it was nervousness and stress related because I've not had a proper outbreak since my early 40s. But until then, I regularly wore plastic gloves to do cleaning, and so do millions of other people. Anyway, the fact that allegedly Bryan Kohberger's vehicle bore no trace of his 4 victims remains a mystery. Not impossible, but highly unlikely. But all of this is basically old news, isn't it? Even the touch DNA on the knife sheath has been examined, discussed for hours, and the only reason why I'm even touching on it is because it does not appear to be such old news, as every bit of supposed evidence presented by the prosecution will have to be re-examined if they don't get their act together very quickly. Why would Bryan Kohberger's legal team have to keep asking for evidence? And why does prosecution keep saying they don't have it, or at least that it is not in their possession? If that is the case, then how did they convince a grand jury to take Bryan Kohberger to trial? What did they present as evidence? Why does prosecution now have to close hearings regarding discovery issues? Should there even be discovery issues at this point? I don't think so. What's up with the stories circulating in the true crime community regarding the 2 survivors, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk? Why are creators saying that Bethany Funk and Dylan, or Bethany or Dylan, are refusing to cross state lines to testify? Is that even possible or a thing, particularly in a murder trial where the defendant can be handed down a death sentence? It does not make sense. So I went and looked it up and even called in some troops to help and explain. Well, the answer to the question is yes, capital letters yes. Although it can be a process, if the witness is reluctant, it is a process followed regularly all over the United States of America. By using the Uniform Act, the prosecutor or the defense can secure the attendance of a witness from another state in criminal cases. Now, there are many Uniform Acts, mostly used in cases where the parties are in different states with slightly different laws. But the one we are talking about is the Uniform Act to secure the attendance of witnesses from without the state in criminal proceedings, 1936. So its name actually says exactly what it is. So with all of that in place to compel an out-of-state witness, why was there an issue to get Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen to testify in front of a grand jury? I do not understand it. There was also a story that Bethany Funk had exculpatory evidence. I can only surmise that it was not true. Otherwise, it would be a huge travesty of justice that she was not forced to testify in front of the grand jury. Can you imagine what it would be like to be sitting in jail as an innocent man or woman because the one person who has the evidence which can prove your innocence is refusing to testify? I do not think there is a single civilized country in the world which would allow that. So let's make it applicable to Bryan Kohberger. He was arrested on December the 30th, 2022. So by now, Bryan Kohberger has been in jail for 1 year and 5 months. If he is indeed guilty, then good. If not, then this is a sick travesty, a shame, and he will likely sue the state for millions if obviously he is not guilty. Much worse than that, though, it will also mean that the true killer is still out there. So what do I really think? Well, let me put it this way. If it wasn't for the fact that Bryan Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial, I would have said he is 99 to 100% innocent. But why would an innocent man be prepared to sit in jail for another year, maybe 2 if he is truly innocent? If I was in that position and innocent, I would be wanting out from day one. Nobody would be wasting my time and my life like that if I did not deserve it. So what the heck is wrong with this defendant and this particular case? Something is missing and I cannot put my finger on it. Nothing I come up with satisfies that feeling that something is amiss. Now, I know I've spoken about a simulation Grey Hughes did of the white Elantra's movements around or near the house in King Road, and then already I said and felt that the movements of the vehicle reminded me of someone looking for someone or waiting for someone to appear. The movements are typical of someone wanting to park, but also wanting to be visible to the person he is to pick up. I've seen my parents, and as a parent, I've done that myself, driving forward, reversing back, looking up at a building to see whether I can see the kids, that kind of thing. And that's the impression the movements of the Elantra or the white vehicle gave me. Now remember, right in the beginning, the sheriff was indeed looking for 2 people and said they were looking for this white car with 2 occupants. So what if there was someone, likely another guy, with Dylan or Bethany visiting? Maybe they fell asleep. Maybe he woke up and for whatever reason did what he did, and for whatever other reason knew Bryan Kohberger and knew that Bryan would likely be the one person still awake, or even if not, then at least be the one person willing to help. What if by the time Bryan Kohberger arrived, the murders had already taken place or was in progress, and that is why whoever was not outside waiting as expected. Now look, because I personally have not yet found any convincing evidence that Bryan and Bryan alone committed this horrible act, I can only surmise that Bryan Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial because he was somehow involved, maybe before, during, or after the fact, or he has some guilty knowledge. That is what I think and feel, but that does not really fit with a guilty or innocent narrative, does it? If he's totally innocent, then the stargazing, running and driving at night is indeed true, and on a personal level, even that is not weird to me. I'm a night owl and always have been for the majority of my life, and until very recently, I slept 3 to 4 hours per night with a crash and an 8 to 10 hours sleep once in 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes once in 2 to 3 months. When I was younger, I got a tremendous sense of peace and calm being out in the cool night air and the virtually empty roads. And by the time I returned home, I would have a drink, tea, coffee. Yes, coffee never kept me awake. Hot chocolate, Milo, or whatever, and go straight to sleep. There were times in my life when work allowed it, where I would sleep whenever I felt sleepy, whether in the morning or in the afternoon, and if I was then up all night, it was just fine. I did some of my best creative work at night when everyone was asleep and there were no interruptions. So how can someone like me turn around and say Bryan Kohberger's alibi is no alibi? I can't, and the joke is that 99% of the time, I was also alone. No one to vouch for me. So unless caught by a traffic camera, there would be no way to prove where I was. So what will the triangulation of Bryan Kohberger's cell phone prove? Will it back up his alibi? Surely, had he taken such a long drive, his vehicle should or may have been picked up by a traffic camera or security camera. But now, so much later, is that footage still available? Can law enforcement go back now and find evidence to back up Bryan Kohberger's alibi? I sincerely doubt it. Okay, guys, we'll stay on this case, and this will not be the last you will hear from me on this case. I have other questions, and we'll discuss those as soon as possible. Next time, however, I want to talk to you about the Suzanne Morphew case. I was very invested in the Morphew case, and I really want to see it through because I have such different feelings and thoughts about the case. And although I'm not a Barry is innocent advocate, I'm also not a Barry is guilty advocate. I personally think and feel that there is a story there. And I even think and feel that Barry may be covering up for someone, but we'll talk about it in the next video. So until then, please take good care of yourselves and each other. Bye.